It's also really nice, something that I didn't think about when I was in the depths of my depression or like my suicidal moments or whatever. I didn't think about anyone else, how this might affect my family, how this might affect my closest friends. Suicide devastates. You have lived this. It devastates families. I had no awareness around that because I was fully focused on myself. It was Ben, just me. I was only worried about me. And I think this project is incredibly valuable because there's like now data that could maybe like help the families grieve with what's happened after the fact. Because like, had I been successful, my family would have, I mean, they had no idea. It's the Army officer in me, but like nobody knew that I was going through anything because I don't let them see that. I was wearing a mask my whole childhood. I was wearing a mask my entire adulthood. And so it just was easy for me to like project one thing when inside there was a whole bunch of other stuff happening. And so I think
This episode, the 38 Challenge podcast with my brother, my very good friend who I've just started getting close in the last couple weeks, but I feel like I've known you forever, Ben Smith. Ben, how's it going, brother?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me.
Dude, of course. Got in last night from Los Angeles. We met in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, dude, I got to come out to Austin. We got to hop on the podcast. So much to talk about, so much to do in this world together, and so many people to help together. So
yeah,
fired up to have you here, man.
Thanks, dude. I feel like that's the main point, like doing. And for me, this is like the first time I've really felt like there's an avenue for me to like do good and do a lot of real good. And so I'm really stoked to be here, and it's great to meet you and become friends. And I see so much alignment in where we're going. I feel like you're like the younger brother I never had, which is like a very cool feeling for me. So
I appreciate that,
thanks
man.
for having me.
So what kind of good do you want to do in this world?
Wow, that's like a very huge question.
Off the get-go.
Yeah, I think, I look at you and I see a younger version of me. And then I sit and I think about that 23-year-old Ben who was going through a lot of stuff. And I think, the easiest answer would be, I just want to help that kid. He could be a veteran or a active duty service member or an athlete or none of the above. I just think that there's young men out there specifically who like really need someone to look up to. And had I had somebody, maybe things might have gone differently, but I'm so thankful for my experience. And I'm so thankful that now I get this opportunity to like really be an example for somebody. And so that's like what I think of when it's the good. It's like just impacting somebody positively so their life can be different.
Yeah, man. So who was the old Ben Smith? Why don't you talk about because dude, you've done a lot of shit in your life. Why don't you talk about, who was the old Ben Smith? How is this? Just go into your story because I find it super interesting.
So I was born August 7th, 1990. Just kidding. I was born and raised in like a small town in Indiana, like central Indiana, just outside Indianapolis. Raised in a home that like from the outside seemed pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had all the things we needed. I noticed very early on that a lot of my like self-worth was placed in my ability to perform, what I looked like to the external crowd, what the grades look like, where do you go to school, how nice your haircut is, that type of stuff. Then naturally I transitioned into the military where it's just like that on steroids. So my self-worth was tied to, my ability to lead, my ability to look great in my uniform, how loud I could be in front of the formation, or like, any number of those things. And then, there's a lot of things that happen inside of those first 28 years of my life. But then I left the military about 4 years ago. The 4-year anniversary was last week. I left the military and realized that like I didn't really know who I was or what I was. And so like basically my whole world came crashing down. Didn't have the fulfillment that I thought I had, while serving. I didn't have the impact that I felt that I had while serving. I went through a whole host of mental health challenges and wasn't prepared at all to navigate them on my own, nor was I prepared to like reach out and ask for help. We've talked a lot in the last couple of days about the narratives that we have for ourselves, or the views that we have of ourselves. And for the longest time, even still today, I think of myself, as broken or a burden or unwanted or any number of things like in that like negative vein. Very rarely do I think of myself positively, which like you may not expect, like looking at me or interacting with me. But that younger Ben didn't stand a chance, man. Didn't stand a chance. And once everything fell apart around me, I tried to run away. That's like my default. I tried to run away. And if I could just be the guy that's like, hey man, like I've been there. Shit's hard sometimes, but maybe it's like not that deep.
Right.
Like maybe you just like need to get really committed to what it is that you want to do in this world and what you want to change or what you want to become. And then like, just don't give up. Just don't give up.
Right. So, and we'll unpack.
Yeah. I kind of went really quick over that.
No. It's a great introduction because we'll unpack a lot of things that you've been through.
Yeah.
And how we'll get into what that darkness looked like for you.
Yeah.
We'll play around in there, and then I think we both, and everyone still goes through things, right? But we'll discuss, how did you pull yourself out of that situation? How did vulnerability play a part of that? And then what are the things that you're doing now? So,
yeah,
we'll jump into that. But before we do, how would you define what it means to be vulnerable?
Yeah, I think, vulnerability is like user dependent. Like you being vulnerable might be different than me being vulnerable because there's different things that affect us or different things that we like hold in our hearts. But I think vulnerability is being afraid and just acting anyway. So it could be like in sharing or like looking inside or like getting up on that stage or whatever it is. Like me being vulnerable is being terrified of what might come out or what like you might see of me and just like showing it anyway. So that's how I would describe it. I'm sure Merriam-Webster has like a different definition, but
no, but I love that definition.
I have a lot of imposter syndrome. It's like me being vulnerable is like, although I feel like I'm not supposed to be here, then I just like show up anyway. Like that's me being vulnerable. And then like good stuff often comes from that. So I'm trying to like, make mental notes and keep track of all the times that I've decided to act in the face of fear and like how it's turned out good for either myself or other people. And then use that as like evidence that I should continue to still show up.
What does imposter syndrome look like for you?
Well, the first thing that I think of is like, in the Army, there's a lot of positional power. Like your rank and your position determine like how people think of you and feel about you and whether they lead you or they don't. And when that like was taken away, or when I left the military and I didn't have that, he's no longer Captain Smith. He's just Ben, the dude who like can barely pay his rent, doesn't have a job, and like didn't save any money after the Army. There's all these like reasons why I shouldn't be the guy that's like in a leadership position in my own life even. And so it's been like a struggle to like transcend those feelings of my like early civilian life. And now 4 years later be like, okay, no, you are the guy that's supposed to lead others. It's funny. I like run a performance coaching business where I like help people navigate wellness in their lives. And very often I'm like, holy shit, my life is chaos. Like, why the fuck am I the dude that's supposed to be helping you navigate these things that are like huge issues to you when I can like barely keep it together,
Right. Yeah. And we had that conversation in the car on the way here. It's like, for me, my imposter syndrome is the same thing, right? Yeah. I get so overwhelmed with what does the future look like? What is the 38 challenge going to turn into? Why am I talking to Ben Smith right now? Why am I doing these podcasts? Who am I to have these conversations? But then you realize, I think one way to beat imposter syndrome is you realize why you're doing it. Yeah. And you realize that, hey, I'm Ben Smith and I have my story and I'm going to share people, right? And like, because I embrace vulnerability and do these things, I'm not an imposter, right? I am who I am, right? And having the awareness and the confidence in doing the things that you tell yourself you're going to do, like waking up in the morning, working out, helping people. That's how you beat imposter syndrome. And man, I still deal with it so very much. And I get terrified of what the future looks like. I get terrified of failing. I get terrified of success. And I think that so many people do. Yeah. And imposter syndrome is not it's just embracing these are all parts of life.
Yeah. And I think it's, you talk about the future. I spend a lot of my time in the past thinking about like things I've said or done that I like don't like.
Right.
So a lot of my imposter syndrome, I think, comes from shame around the person that I was, or maybe even the person that I am. But I think when you're like looking forward to something, I'm going to like butcher this, but one of my favorite examples is like you and I are in the woods together. It's thick, it's dense. You can't really see that far. We've got to travel a long way away. And you're like, oh my God, how the fuck are we going to get there? Like, how do we get there? The trees are so thick. It's nighttime. There's snow on the ground. I don't know if we can get there. It's cold as shit out. And then maybe I look at you or you get this idea. You're like, oh, if I look just down at my feet, I can take one step. The trees like don't get in my way. I can just take one step. And so it's like just a bunch of next steps in a row, shorter term goals that get you ultimately to that place. And it's kind of funny. What I've realized in my life is that if you look, closer, more short range, that end goal is often different when I get there. So it's like I have this idea of what I want to become or what I want to do or the change I want to affect. And then if I focus short on that next right step, then like that goal might evolve and change and grow. And what's really cool is like I also have evolved and changed and grown like in the pursuit of those goals. So it's been pretty cool for me, just navigating the last couple of years to like see a bit of you in me, but like to know that like if you just keep going and keep showing up, I think that'll be like the theme. Just like keep showing up and keep doing the things you're supposed to do. Get up early, make your bed, get cold every now and again, and then you get there.
100%, man.
Yeah,
and I think you embrace vulnerability so well. Like when I first met you, man, it was like that's like
I don't feel that way, so that's nice to hear.
Well, when I first met you, it was just we jumped into this kind of bond really quickly.
Yeah,
in this trust, in this relationship, and it's because you are willing to open up about the things that you've been through, and then we saw the correlation between your story and my brother's story and all these certain things. And I think that vulnerability and admitting imposter syndrome and all these things, right? Like that is how you further relationships. It's how you build trust, and that's how you ultimately become the person who you want to become. So why don't you talk about the experience that you told me when we were super, one of the first times we met, right? What is the darkest point that you've been through in your life?
Yeah. So I'll say one thing before I start this, but that connection that we felt, I think there was something interesting about our relationship where I heard the story of your brother and him navigating his military service, his time out of the Marines, and then what happened afterwards. And a lot of that resonated with me. And I never once thought of anyone else when I was going through those same things. So there's an interesting part of it, like seeing you and seeing how profound that was for you. And I sit here and I'm like, holy fuck, I didn't even think about the fact that this would affect other people. So my story, I got out of the Army in 2018. There's a lot of things that happened in that year. I left the Army with no money in savings. I didn't plan ahead because I was an idiot. I thought I was invincible. And I was like, oh, it'll be great. I'll just get like a $200,000 a year job and like this will be sick and like I'm untouchable. The girl I was dating, she and I ended up breaking up. I was living in a city that was way too expensive for me, and I was forced to take a job that I like didn't even want. I was doing work at this digital marketing agency, and I was like, why the fuck am I supposed to care about marketing services for a company that I like don't believe in? Was making almost no money. And my role like didn't have a commission structure. So I was just like stuck in this place where I was like, fuck, how do I grow out of this? Like, what am I supposed to do next? And I mentioned before how my knee jerk or my like default reaction is to run away. Right. So I often do a thing where I'll blow something up. This happens in my relationships. This happens in business ventures. This happens in friendships where like when I feel like there's nowhere to go, I just run. And I tried to do that like with my life. So in October of 2018, I was like, well, fuck, I'll just figure out how to like run away permanently. And so I attempted suicide in October of 2018, and I had a moment of clarity. I ended up taking a bunch of pills and drinking alcohol, and knew that this would like cause me to go to sleep and then never wake up. And I ingested all this stuff, and I was like, fuck. I remember grabbing my sink, and I'm like holding onto the sink, and I'm like, fuck, why did you do that? Like, why the fuck did you just do that? And so I had a history of eating disorder. I was bulimic for most of my 20s, and so I'm like very comfortable pulling the trigger, for lack of a better term. And so I just purged and threw this all up in my sink, and I was like, fuck, man. I remember sitting there on the floor with my back against the door like opened inward, and I remember sitting against the door, and it was like bouncing a little bit. You know, when you're like in like a stressful situation, you like rock, or you like, I don't know, just like I remember just like bouncing and rocking against the door, and like, fuck. Like I just remember repeating fuck. I don't know why, but like just fuck. And I was like so disappointed in myself, and there was like conflict in my family, there was conflict with my friends, there was conflict with myself, and I was like, fuck. We can't do that again. You gotta do something. I ended up quitting that job, and I was like, okay, this is like a new start. So like didn't have that job that I felt was beneath me. And then it just got worse, and my fulfillment was less and less and less with each day.
After the first attempt.
Yeah. And so this is like December of 2018, and my fulfillment is less and less. I ended up going home for Christmas and having like the worst experience. Like there was fighting everywhere. Like the family structure that I thought I had wasn't reality, or at least wasn't the current reality. So I was like, fuck, okay, I can't talk to anybody here about what's happening. I still haven't spoken to anybody. My younger sister and I, who are now like as close as two people could be, she and I just expressed to her that I was like really struggling, and I didn't allude to what that was, but like she knew that something was up. And so a couple other things happened. I was trying to get this other job, and it was a failure. I didn't get the job, and then I tried to get this other job. I didn't get that job. And so I'm like running out of money. I'm like running out of time is how I like perceived it. Right. And I tend to catastrophize everything. So I'm like, fuck, like what? I'm just going to be homeless. Like I'm just another sad story of like this kid who like was a high performer, who like had all this remorse about leaving the service, like, cause I quit. So I'm like, you fucking quitter. Like you quit the army, you quit your job, you quit your relationships, you quit your family. Like my narrative was awful. And I look back and I'm like, it was so self-centered. I didn't think about anybody else. I was only thinking about myself. And then like January of 2019, so you know what, this is fucking stupid. Like you can't quit suicide also. Right. Which like, how fucking nuts is that?
Holy shit. So your thought process was like, I made this decision to end my life, I'm going to do it.
My thought process was, you better follow through with something. And so I did the same thing. And then I ended up going to bed, and I guess what happened is I consumed too much alcohol and ended up throwing up in my sleep, and waking up the next morning like, holy fuck. And so like that was the first moment where I was like, oh my God, my roommate was going to come home and find me here. Like he was a veteran also. His name's Caleb. That dude saved my life, like for real. And he didn't know till years after, but he knew I was going through some shit. But yeah, that was that morning. I was like, holy fuck. Caleb was going to come home and like find me in my bed. And then like his life now has this like thing that he has to deal with because like I've done this selfish thing. That's I have a lot of shame around that. And so that I think leads to the narrative where I feel like it's funny because I felt like I was a burden, so I didn't reach out for help. And then I do this drastic thing. And then like now after the fact, I'm like, holy fuck.
So when you were, because I think sometimes it's a quick spiral for people.
Yeah.
I think for you it's kind of a more like a longer every single day, right? Fighting this anxiety and fighting this depression. What did that look and feel like in your life? That anxiety, that depression?
It's like a state of freeze. Like when I think that, I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but I fall into this like state of freeze, like immobility. And so I often the sequence is like I become depressed about a thing that's happened. So I'm looking back, I feel shame around something or guilt for something. And then I become anxious about my ability to like transcend that experience and like do good later.
Right.
And then I get into this state of freeze. I mean, fuck, this morning I woke up and I had like a number of things that I needed to accomplish, and I felt shitty because I got in late and I overslept in the morning. Like there's all these things. And so it's like a daily thing. But now I just have the tools, or at least like a little bit of awareness to understand that like, yo, you don't need to do anything right now. Mm-hmm. Like I was also very uncomfortable with my feelings. I didn't understand how to navigate having feelings. And so like, of course, if I feel shame and I feel anger and I feel sadness, like I was trying to like solve the problem. And unfortunately, a less aware, younger version of me thought that solving that problem meant just ending everything, like feeling nothing instead of feeling those things. I had a conversation last week with somebody, and she asked me this question. She goes, this topic came up because we were talking about like what my life's mission is now. And she was like, was it that you just didn't want to be alive, or that you just were trying to run away from the current reality? And I was like, I was just trying to get away from the current pain, just the pain, the feeling of dissatisfaction or despair that I had in that moment. I was just trying to get away from that. Mm-hmm. I didn't see there being any options. Yeah. And so like now, if I can do anything, it's just like, there's so many options. There's so many resources. Every single person in my contact list in my phone would have preferred that I call them than do something drastic. And like, that wasn't even an option for me, which is like,
why do you think that? So no one, obviously people from the outside might be able to have told that something was wrong, but you were internalizing and fighting these demons all by yourself internally and felt that. Why do you think that there was no choice to reach out to people? I'm curious because it's our mission, right? How do we get people to understand that you have to reach out to someone?
I think it's this conversation. Mm-hmm. In my world, nobody was talking like this. Mm-hmm. I went and saw a counselor one time when I was in the Army, and they gave me a little packet that said, oh, you might have anxiety. And I was like, oh, is that what it is? Is that what it is? Yeah. Like a little, I remember it was a little stapled packet. They're like, here, just read up on this. I'm like, brother, I'm trying to like off myself like daily. What are you doing? Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, no shit.
I just need help. Like, I just need help. Mm-hmm. I just need somebody.
And it's crazy, man. Cause I think when you're in that moment and there's listeners, I'm here. First of all, going back to your other point, like I'm in a point of my life right now where I feel that too. Like I think especially people who are high performing, people who have large aspirations, right? Like you said, like someone who I think is always trying to achieve something. Like I'm at a point right now where it's like waking up in the morning is like tough. Like being overwhelmed with how many decisions, how many things you need to do. Like, dude, it's paralyzing. Yep. And like you can, on the outside, you can seem like you have everything going for you, but it's on the inside, you're struggling with these internal demons. And I just think this is why we have to have these conversations, because people need to understand that you're not alone in those thoughts. And I feel it every day. You feel it every day. But reaching out to someone is an option. It is, and it needs to be the only option, right? And having these conversations, like taking that step and showing up is the most important part of it, right? Yeah. Just showing up.
It's like, specifically with the veteran community and the athlete community too. You're in these like team environments where you have to like look strong for your peers or for your subordinates or whatever it is. And like, that's all well and good. Like when you have a mission to complete or whatever, like you're right. I'm not tired. I'm not sleepy. I'm not cold. I'm not hungry. I'm not any of these things. But like when shit gets like real later, like when I'm out of the Army, like I'm able to like feel things, and I'm able to talk about how I'm tired and how I'm worn out and how I'm sad and how I'm all these things. I didn't have the language or like the experience or the understanding to like share the things that were happening inside. And I thought that because I was like a big, strong soldier, like I don't get the luxury of doing that. And then I've got this narrative from like childhood and from early adolescence where it's like, oh, I'm a burden and I don't want to impose. And like, you know, I know specifically where I was and ultimately going to go with this was like, I had somebody say to me that my experience is not unique. Mm-hmm. And that's like kind of in line with what you just last said. My experience is not unique and neither is yours. And people navigate it every day. And I think, you know, we talked before about like, there's two ways to approach this. It's like, yo, like toughen up and like go get help. That's one way to like look at it. Or the other side is like, you know, if you're more sensitive, like what I needed was someone to be like, yo, it's going to be all right.
Right.
Like you're going to be just fine. And it's funny because had you asked 23-year-old Ben what he needed somebody that was going to be like, yo, don't be a fucking pussy. You know, if getting help is what you need, go get help.
Yeah.
But like, I think learning more about myself and learning more about what I need, and this has all come through like, you know, years of therapy now and a lot of exploration. It's like, no, that kid needed like a, hey, like, are you all right? What is it that you need? And I think what's really cool about platforms like this and about the like ever expanding resources for veterans and athletes and just like people in general is like you can like kind of tailor your experience to what you might need. So it's not a one size fit all. It's not a packet that says, hey, you might have general anxiety disorder. You should read about it. It's like if you need a specific thing, those resources are available. And that's like with the expansion of like other types of therapies and like all the stuff. It's really cool and I'm incredibly excited.
Yeah, and I think what vulnerability allows you to do is explore that.
Yeah, because without it, you don't really know.
Exactly. Like if you don't reach out for that one person for help, like if you never take that first step towards seeking help, then how do you know what it is that you need? You don't.
Exactly. You don't.
And there is something out there that will help you.
Of course.
There is.
The first thing I looked for, the first avenue I pursued wasn't it.
Mm-hmm. What was the first thing you looked for?
I tried just regular talk therapy. I went to I like Googled therapists and I tried regular therapy. What I felt like it was me just reopening the same wound, just me sharing the same stories over and over again. And I became incredibly frustrated with like the fact that it just like didn't seem to solve any problem. And then that roommate, Caleb, the guy that I lived with, he was like, no, you're going to go see this other therapist. And so he took me, he was like, here you go. And he introduced me to my therapist. She's been my therapist for 4 years.
So walk me through from like, what did it look like that first day that you showed up and you decided, hey, I need help. Was it after the second time and you woke up that morning?
January 19th, 2019. Yeah, January 19th, 2019 was my first therapy session with my current therapist. It was the first time I was like committed to trying therapy.
And so was it just like you had the second chance? Like what made you go see the therapist instead of just...
Caleb made me go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was like, you're going. He's like, I got this great person that I know. I've met her. She's in Los Angeles. Like, you're going. And he had gone through his own journey, a bit of a spiritual journey. It's funny. There's a lot of parallels here. He was a West Point graduate like me, several years older, but he played in the NFL and had a history of, you know, I'm sure TBI and other things. Had a similar experience where he left the service and left the NFL and, you know, wasn't able to navigate his experience and needed to like sort all of his stuff out. And, you know, I was going through that too, just several years removed. And so he was able to like be my guide through that process. So he was like, no, you're going. And so I just started going. I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand what was happening. Luckily, I stumbled upon a type of therapy called somatic healing. It's also called like inner child healing or reparenting. There's several different like types or like, you know, names. And it was something that I like really needed. What's funny is a lot of my problems, I'm learning now a lot of my problems are TBI related. Didn't know that at the time. I'm also learning that a lot of my problems aren't military related. The military just exacerbated the things that I had experienced as a child. And so it like really became like taking multiple steps back and uncovering the like true underlying like reasons for the way that the reasons that I feel the way that I feel. And so a lot of it had to do with like the relationship to my mother and to my earliest caregivers. And so like really going back, you know, into my psyche as a child has been incredibly valuable. So that's where I started.
So let's talk TBI real quick.
Yeah.
So how did you start to find out that a lot of these problems were TBI related?
Yeah. So I played ice hockey my whole life. Had a lot of head injuries. I was an artillery officer in the Army, just like your brother was an artillery officer in the Marines. What I didn't know at the time was that every time one of those weapon systems goes off, it's a small micro concussion. Didn't really wear ear pro that often. So it's hard to command and control when you can't hear anything. So I often was without ear protection. Which, like, looking back, I wish that was different, but you know, it is what it is. And then I hit my head a couple times. I remember specifically this one time in 2016, another time before that in 2015. And then I had a head trauma in 2020. I hit my head in 2020 and I was like, this is weird. I couldn't like really speak the same. Like I felt like I was stuttering and I like was having trouble remembering like things that I should not be forgetting.
Right after it?
Right
or
after.
Okay.
Right after.
Okay.
Yeah. Hit it really hard. In the same spot I had a concussion previously. And so I was like, oh, that's really weird.
Yeah.
I had some friends. I don't know if you know Kirk Parsley, Doc Parsley, former team guy, former SEAL.
I have to reach out to him.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
We can do
for
that.
Sure.
But he and I have some mutual friends. The friends of his were like, yo, you need to like do hyperbarics. You need to like get on this supplement stack. You need to like do all these things to like fix this right now. So I did some hyperbaric chamber treatments. I got on some different supplements. He has a sleep supplement that I was taking. And it seemed to like fix a lot of the problems. But then I started to like delve into the research that he had been doing with a lot of like former team guys, with like memory and their inability to sleep and their inability to like function cognitively the way that they were. I was like, holy shit, this is me.
Right. Like
they're getting into their car and can't remember where they're supposed to go. Like that was happening to me. Or I'd walk into the room and be like, why am I in this room? Or like lose my keys and my phone and my wallet every single day. Like there was just these little things that were just like, that shouldn't be that way. Or like it wasn't that way, you know, not too long ago. And
not to mention the behavioral changes as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also, you know, a big red flag. But for me, it was just those small things. And I was like reading and I was like, holy shit, this parallels my life. I should like learn more about this. And then more recently, I got involved with a guy named Daniel Amen. Doc Amen is what he goes by on social media, but he's like a psychiatrist in Southern California. And so through his practice, I got some like actual imaging done of my brain. And it showed, you know, what the head traumas I'd experienced had caused, you know, limited prefrontal cortex function, my temporal lobes, you know, not working the way that they should.
Right.
And then, you know, that describes the way that I exist in the world. So like through the process of like uncovering what my TBI has done to my brain, it like is incredibly validating because I'm like, oh my God, I'm not an insane person.
Right. That was my question. Like how helpful was it to understand that you had an injury to your brain? Because I think a lot of, especially athletes in the military community, especially doesn't understand that a lot of the problems that they're dealing with is caused by an injury to the brain, not that you're nuts. Yeah.
It's like, he literally listed out, like wrote out this like report on like what my brain, how it presents in human form. And they do imaging that's like structural. So it shows like blood flow and oxygenation, and where there's like parts missing, that's like where you've gotten trauma and there's no blood flow there. And there's another image that's like electricity, or for lack of a better term, electricity. And it shows like what trauma or like what circumstantial stuff has caused inside of your brain. And so like the emotional regulation center was like incredibly overactive. And so it's like I've got limited prefrontal cortex function. So my like executive functioning, my planning, my ability to shift and change tasks is limited. And then my temporal lobes, which cause my like temper, don't really work that well. And then my emotional regulation center is like exploding because it's so hyperactive. So it would make sense that I would like have trouble doing my daily life, and then also become incredibly frustrated by the fact that I can't navigate the world the way that I'd like. And so having that understanding, like basically like initially I was really, really relieved because like, okay, shit, like that stuff was real. Because for the longest time I was like, oh, this is like all in my head. I'm making everything up. Like, used to be such a high performer, used to be so good, and now like I'm not, you know. And I just like, my view of myself continued to like degrade, and so that was really nice. But then, you know, me being the person I was, you know, like former whatever I was, I'm like, oh, I should fix this, or like it could be better, or like you shouldn't take that as like the gospel, like you're better than this. And so it's been an incredible process for me.
Do you view that as a positive or a negative? Because I think that the fact that you knew that there was an injury allowed you to then be passionate about correcting that injury.
That part's positive. I think the frustration that I experienced, or the helplessness, isn't positive. But I think I want to be able to surrender to stuff.
Right.
And like, so instead of like trying really hard to like fix everything at once, my new thing is like, okay, I know what's happening. I know the ways to fix it. I've got a plan in place. Like everything is going to like slowly come together. I just need to like chill for a second and let the stuff evolve. And I think that like kind of, there's parallels there, or like that transcends my own like professional life and like my interpersonal relationship life, where it's like, I don't need to force anything right now. Like I can just like commit to like improving myself, whether that's cognitively or like in whatever avenue, but like I can just like surrender to the process and just like not freak out about any of it, because it was giving me anxiety that I was like functioning at a lower level than I could be.
Yeah. And I see a lot of, so I can draw my brother's experience, right?
Yeah.
And so as he got out of the Marine Corps, right, as this, you know, this described as Captain America of the Marines, right? And he got out of this transition, I think experienced a lot of things you did, right? Who am I? The football jersey's off, the uniform's off, right? I don't have this position. It's hard for me to get jobs. He was going through an interview process, and later in life, I noticed this, you know, when he was alive, but he started to like develop a stutter, and someone who was very, very intelligent, especially like strategically. Like he would read a book once a week because he could.
Yeah.
Was always playing chess. Was always looking at, you know, very, very talented strategy wise.
Yeah.
And he was going through a job interview once, and the person asked them if he had a speech impediment. And for him, I think for someone like him and someone like yourself to hear that, I mean, I can't imagine.
It's debilitating.
Yeah, I can't imagine how debilitating it was. And what people need to understand is that's caused by an injury to the brain.
Yeah.
And that it's not like, no, you don't have a speech impediment. You have a brain injury.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this sense of, what I don't like is that there's a sense of hopelessness, right? I don't want there to be this sense of hopelessness, because there is a lot of hope. And I think that you are an example of hope, right? And there's so many people that have gone out and gotten these different therapies and showed up every single day because they say, I'm going to fix this problem.
Yeah.
So, and I think also one of the things for hope is what we can do for research in the future. And one of the only ways we can get research is for people to pledge their brain, donate their brain.
Yep.
I know you and I have had this conversation before, but would you be comfortable pledging your brain to Project Enlist?
Absolutely.
Cool. And why is that?
I think it's important for, the future. If I'm able to provide some sort of new information because I give my brain up, then like I'm more than willing and completely happy to do that. I don't need it anymore once I'm gone, you know?
Thank you, but I'll give you this card then.
Yeah.
And so thank you for pledging.
Of course.
And to listeners, you can pledge your brain at projectenlist.org, because the future is filled with hope.
I think it's also really nice, something that I didn't think about when I was in the depths of my depression or like my suicidal moments or whatever. I didn't think about anyone else, how this might affect my family, how this might affect my closest friends. Suicide devastates. You have lived this. It devastates families. I had no awareness around that because I was fully focused on myself. It was Ben, just me. I was only worried about me. And I think this project is incredibly valuable because there's like now data that could maybe like help the families grieve with what's happened after the fact. Because like, had I been successful, my family would have, I mean, they had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Army officer in me, but like nobody knew that I was going through anything because I don't let them see that. I was wearing a mask my whole childhood. I was wearing a mask my entire adulthood. And so it just was easy for me to like project one thing when inside there was a whole bunch of other stuff happening. And so I think like, had I been successful, a project like this would have given them at least some like closure.
Yeah. And it doesn't make it easier, but it makes it make sense.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like, okay, there really was nothing that I could have done. If he reached out, then there could have been something
Sure.
we could have done, right? Because there are ways. So,
yeah.
So as your roommate forced you to go seek help and you started this journey of healing.
I was so pissed too. I was so sad that like, I have this like thing ingrained in my brain. I remember I was like dealing with like, I was navigating this like really stressful romantic relationship. And I like remember reaching out to my dad and being like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do next. Like I was kind of like in this moment where I was like, fuck, I know this isn't right, but like I need to like take care of this other person. And like, I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to navigate this. And he said something along the lines of like, it was like, you better get out of there or you're going to need therapy later. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do therapy. Like, so my entire viewpoint, and then my first ever time of therapy, I was like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever done in my life. Like all I'm doing is talking about how sad I am. Like, I don't know where this is going. And so I go into this like therapy work with my now therapist and it's like way more expensive than I can afford. And like, I have to drive across town and it's like all these things. And I'm just like, fuck, I don't want to do any of this. I am so thankful that I just kept showing up. Like, that's the thing. It's just like, even though it was the thing I knew I needed,
Just kept showing up.
I just kept showing up. I didn't want to do it, but I kept showing up. And it totally changed my life.
It's like anything that's hard. Like you never like, we can start directing the conversation that way to things that have helped you.
Yeah.
But
that's where I'd like this to go too. I don't need to be the guy that's like, hey, yo, I had like a mental health problem and I tried to kill myself. Like I want the value of my life to be like, look, this is what we can do now.
Well, it's important that people understand how serious it was for you and why you were in the place that you were, because I think people can relate to that and they need to be able to relate to that to then understand how you got out of that darkness and are living in it, right? Yeah. And as we all do, navigating it, right? Yeah. And showing up every single day, because that's the thing that's hard. And I think I love what you just said is like, showing up is the hard part. Whether like, if it's 5:30 in the workout or in the morning to do a workout, whether it's jumping into an ice bath or a cold plunge, whether it's picking up the phone and making a call you don't want to have, whether it's coming to this office and grinding out another day, like doing hard things, no one likes doing it. Like no one's just like, hell yeah, dude. Like I cannot wait to have this super uncomfortable conversation. Like, hell yeah, dude. Yeah. Like, this ice bath is going to feel so good. Like it's exactly what I like. Yeah. No, but showing up and getting in the ice bath or jumping out of a plane parachuting or showing up to a counselor. Yeah. That's what vulnerability is.
Yeah. In the face of fear, acting anyway. Yeah. And I take it a step further where I just don't negotiate with myself. So like if I know that there's things that have to be done now, this is like my new mindset, and I don't do it every day. Yeah. Like there are moments of complete freeze and complete despair.
It's my mindset too. And it's like, sometimes I do negotiate with myself, but it's never twice in a row.
I count down from 5 and then I do it. Whatever it is. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I go. And that's like been my thing for the last couple of years. It's funny. My father's actually the one that told me to start doing that. I'm sure it's not his idea. It's somebody else's idea, but
it's great advice.
When shit gets hard, I just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get out of bed, get in the water, that type of thing. And then there's no time to think. I don't have to do this like thing in my head where I try and like analyze my way out of a thing. I don't spend any wasted energy, you know, on a thing that doesn't really matter, or on a topic that doesn't really matter, any time on a thing that doesn't matter. But to bring it all the way back to like what I'm doing now, I'll say therapy saved my life.
Okay.
You know, from a point where I like wasn't in a place to like really continue. I was actively trying not to continue. And therapy allowed me to experience myself in a different way, to learn more about myself, to learn more about my relationship with other people, and to learn more about like how my perspective is just like a small portion of like reality. There are so many other perspectives. And like I look at like, you know, the relationship to my family, they have a perspective. I have one. And at the time it was very much the victim mentality. But if I look at things from other people's perspectives, I can understand how like I'm more in the driver's seat than I ever imagined.
What's one actionable piece of advice that you received from talk therapy?
From talk therapy?
From this therapist who...
From my current therapist?
From the one...
Anyone.
Yeah, from the situation which you said, like pulled you out of this wanting to kill yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think from her specifically, it's actually... I haven't done this in a long time, but so what we did was we got a picture of me as a child, and it was like a little baby Ben, like a 3-year-old Ben. And every morning I had to write a letter to this little kid and like just tell him how important he is and how valued he is, and how me, the adult Ben, and this childhood Ben are not the same person. And I get to handle the stressors of the adult world, and he can just like be a kid. And so there was this like incredible like realization that I'm more than just this like wounded 28-year-old guy that's like trying to navigate this thing. There's like other parts of me, and there's like community across my lifetime where it's like this little dude needs you to like be strong. This little dude needs you to like fulfill his dreams, you know? And so I was able to like have a broader perspective of my contribution to the world. I hope that makes sense, but in the moment it did for me. It was the thing I loved. I would get up every morning and write this letter to this little kid.
Right.
The other parts of it were just this understanding that I'm not broken. I think a lot of the trauma world, you get hyper fixated on like what's happened to you. But I was blessed. My therapist was also very, very, very intentional with how we talked about what's happened to me, or like what I've perceived has happened to me, and then how I'm going to be the one to like change the narrative moving forward. That was incredibly valuable. And then with the like introduction of other therapies, like psychedelics have changed my entire life. And that was incredibly profound, both for like coming to terms with like things that have happened, or like having like an ego death, and then realizing that like I'm in control, I'm in the driver's seat. I don't have to continue following the same path. I don't have to continue thinking in the same like negative thought loops. I can like broaden my perspective, and I can go anywhere and do anything, which has been really cool.
Yeah.
Cause like before I thought there was nowhere to go. That was like, if you look back at like my journals, it's like, there's nowhere to go.
Right.
I'm stuck. There's nowhere to go. There was no future.
I think that's a great point, because sometimes in this life you will think you will not be able to see past the darkness. You will not be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's always there. Just keep, like you said, keep walking out of that forest, man. Like just, you can always take that next step. You can always see what the next step is, and take that next step. And there will always be a light at the end of the tunnel. Even when in your journaling, I can't see my way out of this. It's like, I promise you there is a way out. And on the other side of that, man, and now I feel like from our conversations, it's overwhelming once you understand how many options you have, right? That you are in control of your life, right? And you can go do whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want.
And that's exciting, but that also creates anxiety too.
Whatever you want. And I've decided like this is a choice every day, like an active choice, because my body defaults to anxiety. But I've decided that when anxiety comes on, I'm going to view it from the perspective of excitement. And so like that takes work. Like that's a choice that I have to make. And I think there's a lot of this too, where I thought, again, this is that like victim mentality, or the things are happening to me mentality. I thought that like, okay, I go to therapy, things are different now. I take the psychedelic drugs, things are different now. I jump in the cold water, things are different now. That's not true at all. it's like a gateway to you being able to choose in a different direction. So because of my therapy, now when a situation presents itself that might activate me or might have activated me in the past, I can now choose to perform or act in a different manner. Same thing with like psychedelics. I've learned now that there's more beyond the world that I know, the world that I perceive. And because of that, I can now choose to navigate this world in a different way. I'm the driver, which is the new thing. It's like a new perspective. 28-year-old Ben, who was set on ending his own life, didn't understand that he was in control.
Yeah.
The only thing I could control was ending it. But now, because I've transcended that experience, I can control everything. And that's like such a crazy, like my heart rate just went up a little bit because I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Like, you got to do more stuff. And then that kind of plays into the surrender thing. Because I know that I can control the rest of my life and the way that I navigate this world, there's like peace and safety in that, where it's like, okay, you can just like kind of just like chill and experience it and enjoy it and love, like, and just be grateful for what's at your feet. But then like also when presented with situations that like you get to choose, like make the choice. And so like, I'm excited to be here with you. I'm excited for like our ability, and especially your ability, to like affect change. You said earlier, like, you're looking ahead at all these crazy things, and all I could think was like, you're going to change the world. And I hope I get to like play a small part in that, but I also hope that like in my own world, I get to make some change too.
Dude, well, we're going to do it together, brother.
Yeah.
In part, like after our conversations, like psychedelics and not the psychedelics of like, I want to go trip balls with my friends.
No.
And like that's not,
I mean, it started that way.
yeah. But like, you know, and however it starts, just like understanding how beneficial it can be for people.
Yeah.
And like, dude, if eating that glass saves your life, like,
Give me another glass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like all this stigma around like what can help people, like, who cares? Like, dude, like, do whatever it is that saves your life. And so for you, from past conversations, you would credit a lot of transformation in your life from psychedelics, which you went into, and then also cold therapy.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about the future of cold therapy, because I think it's just like fad now, right? It's like, it's like do these hard things, which is 100% true, but like there's a neurological response and hormone response to this thing. So how has that changed your life? Because I feel like that's one of the things you would credit to.
Yeah. So I'd say, and I've told you this before, probably in the car on the way here, but therapy and psychedelics saved my life. Cold exposure and breath work allowed me to thrive. Like, just like, there's almost like not words for how profound it is, because like it's the thing that I didn't want to do the most. Like, I was such a baby. Like, a cold shower was killing me.
How'd that whole journey start for you?
Well, so like, you know, it's like a hazing tool, or like a stress inducer. Sometimes in the military, they make you get cold and wet or sandy or whatever, depending on like your branch of service. Like, you know, water or cold water is incorporated often as a stressor. But while I was, so part of my introduction into therapy, I've always been incredibly curious, which is like kind of funny to think about, because like when it mattered most, I wasn't curious. And I was so locked into like, okay, there's only one solution to my problem. But I've always been incredibly curious and interested in like obscure things. And so the psychedelics were like, oh, I just want to experiment. Like my drug use, I just want to experiment. And so ice baths, I was presented with an opportunity through a gym I was training in. I had experience. I'd gotten cold before. I'd done like polar plunges in bodies of water, just like for fun, right? Because it's a hard thing, and sometimes it doesn't even need to be that deep. It's just like you want to do a hard thing. Go do it.
Jump in that water, yeah.
But then I got indoctrinated into a system at a gym that I was coaching in, and ice and breath became a very important part of that facility. And so I was ice bathing. That's what the word is. I was taking ice baths a couple times a week for a couple years in a row. And I just realized my ability to handle the stressors of my life. Like, I got better and better and better at it. And I think it's like training, like anything, you know, small exposures over time, even like with TBI, small exposures to traumatic brain injury over time lead to like some major thing.
CTE.
the same thing with like training. You show up to the gym 3 times a week for a month, nothing really happens, but you show up 3 times a week for 10 years. In 10 years, you're going to be like looking and feeling really good. It was the same thing with the ice. And then quarantine happened and I stopped icing. And so it wasn't me doing the ice that allowed me to see the profound effect. It was when the ice went away. And I realized I couldn't handle the stressors. There was other things that happened in my life at that moment. Incredibly stressful things that happened during quarantine, during our time in lockdown. And without the ice there, I realized how profound an asset it was. And then so I just started incorporating it more and more and more. Now it's a primary focus of the coaching business that I have, of my work with the people that I coach. And I think, I also have ADHD, and I think a lot of people struggle with that, or they struggle with symptoms of.
I do.
Symptoms of ADHD.
I think like a lot of people struggle with the symptoms of ADHD.
I mean, the world is kind of programming you to feel this way, to be dopamine seeking, to have a dopamine system that's like functioning less than optimally. And what I've found is that getting really cold, like, it gives you such a dopamine rush. I think the number is like 250% increase in natural dopamine production, but there's no crash. Like, I used to use a lot of cocaine and it gave me the same dopamine rush, but there was a massive crash and a fallout afterwards. This is that effect, but like so much better because I just feel incredible. It's funny how you try and naturally solve for the things that your body's missing. Like, if you're deficient in some mineral, your body's going to be like predisposed to like try and find the food that has that mineral. If you're deficient in dopamine or serotonin, your body's going to like seek out opportunities to increase those levels naturally. I just happened to stumble across ice, and it was just because of my curiosity, and it's become the most profound thing. So like now every week, multiple times a week, every time I take a shower, I just get cold.
Do you ever take warm showers?
I do. Yeah. I usually start the showers warm, and then turn them cold. Yeah. And then incorporating breath work. I'm really interested in so classically the contrast, in contrast therapy would be like temperature, like hot and cold. I really like the idea of doing a really hard thing. And I found that like when you get really hot, the ice or the cold is like a relief from the heat. And I didn't like that. I know there's value there. I still do that.
Right.
But when I want to do a really hard thing, I like to contrast. I call it intention, but I'm not really sure the name that would go with this, but I like to contrast active and passive work. So the active work would be breath. I'm the one that's driving the breath. So I do some intentional breathing. And then the passive work is the cold. And I get in the cold. And I sit there. And then my goal while being in the cold is to get back into an active state, to be in control of the breath, to be in control of the scenario.
So because I did a cold plunge last night, and we're about to go get cold as hell after
I'll
this.
take you through it.
Yeah. But so the goal is to then, because I know like you can do Wim Hof breathing, right?
Yeah.
And you can
Which I love.
And that's kind of forcing yourself into this like state of panic almost.
I love it.
And then when you get in the water, it's simulating that, right? You're in this state of panic, and then you have to slow down your breath. Is that your goal? Is like I guess when you get in the water, like what's your goal? To immediately slow down your breath to as quickly as you can?
I use the breath as just like a tether. So like when shit's getting froggy and like it's out of control and I'm like in pure chaos, it's like, what's the one thing I can come back to? Well, it's the thing that's like innately me. It's my breath. It's a part of me. My breath is different than yours. Like my cadence is different. And so I just try and get in tune. There's this really nice, one of my favorite, I guess, I don't know what you'd call her. Her name's Sarah Blondin. If you look her up on Spotify or SoundCloud, she has these incredible spoken word meditations.
Is she on Insight?
Probably.
Yeah, I forget what app she's on. She's probably on it.
She's unbelievable.
She's really soothing voice.
Unbelievable. She talks about grounding through the breath.
And
there's like tons of ways to ground yourself. But this is my favorite, talking about breathing deep into your belly, filling your low back. And then what I like to do is be forceful with my exhale. So if you do one breath like that, like you're already
right.
Like I'm here right now in the room. And so a lot of people, their first reaction when they get in the cold water is to hyperventilate. Short, fast, quick breaths. They forget that they're even breathing. They don't even know where they are. Their feet are cold, so they've like lost their mind. And if you can get in and understand like you're going to be totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to die.
Yeah.
Like, I swear you won't die. You can just tie yourself back to your breath. You can last there forever. And it's so profound. It's almost like you talked about self-confidence with like the getting up early and committing to yourself and like holding, like if you say you're going to do something, you do it. It's how you build self-confidence. This is a really incredible way to like put yourself into a challenging situation and for me, improve self-confidence.
That's exactly what it is. And also the benefit of
all the other benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there'll be a lot of interesting, I'm very interested into the research behind all that and how does that play into.
Yeah. So my experience is just, purely anecdotal,
right.
Just what I've done with people and with myself. And a lot of my work with psychedelics has been very much the same. Like, how has it impacted me and the people that I'm closest with?
Mm-hmm.
But it's been the most incredible teacher. Just in terms, I think a lot of it, like the anxiety and the depression and the suicidal thoughts and the whatevers, I just felt so out of control. There's a level of just like my life was in pure like chaos and a spiral. It was just out of control. And I was just trying to grasp. It was just some bid for control. Mm. And now having the ability to control myself in that incredibly stressful situation on a almost daily basis is just another piece of data, another experience that bolsters my ability to control myself in other scenarios that might be just as stressful. Mm-hmm. So I know it's gaining popularity all over the place. Yeah. Where I live, it's ice baths are a thing in LA.
Yeah.
I know here in Austin as well.
As I should be, but I think we need to be able to provide more education and more resources to people, right? Yeah. Especially, I think for the veteran community, it could be profound, right? As they deal with the things of transition, because it puts you back in that state of adrenaline and, but in a way that is natural, in a way that is healthy. Yeah. So as we wrap up this conversation, what is, because you've been there, you've tried, you've tried taking your life, you've woken up, you've helped pull yourself out of that situation, and now you are navigating and thriving in this life. What is your number one piece of advice to someone who was in the spot that you were in 2018?
First, I'd say don't give up. Don't give up. The only way you blow it is if you give up. And that's with anything in your life. Mm-hmm. Don't give up. I wish I would have called my sister. Sitting here now, I wish I would have called my sister. But I didn't. And so I think once you've decided that you're not going to give up, the next step is just to reach out to anybody. They don't even have to be a professional. They don't have to be a part of this. They don't have to be a part of anything. Just reach out to anybody. And if you don't have anybody, there are places where you can reach out. National Suicide Hotline. Call the Domino's down the street. Reach out to anybody. And you're like, oh, that's scary. Yeah, but that's vulnerability. Reach out to anybody. Because I can assure you that anybody in my phone book would have rather I called them than trying to do the things that I did. And I have a lot of shame around this. And this is my work in being vulnerable. And this is my work in looking at the deepest corners of my shadows and the things that I'm uncomfortable with. But I still haven't had the conversations with the people that I'm closest with, who I should have reached out to. I can imagine that they resent me for that. And this is a story that I'm telling myself, but I can imagine that they're frustrated. And it's been years. It's been several years, but
have they reached out to you?
I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of them, but it's it's we haven't broached the subject yet. I haven't been hey, look.
So do you think that that's the hardest thing for you right now?
I think that's one of them. I have a long list of, I have a lot of things I need to do to clear my conscience and to and then again, that's me being selfish, right? That's all about me. But I think there's a lot of things that I need to do to maybe make other people feel okay. And I'm not perfect, and I'm just navigating this, And so there's so many aspects of this where it's I don't know what the decision is or what the right decision is. But I'm just out here doing my best. And I think we all are. But if I could talk to anybody that's like in a situation that like seems dire or you know, they're on the precipice of making some sort of permanent decision, like just don't give up. Like you can be anything you want to be, and you don't have to be that. Don't give up.
I got chills, man. That's the best piece of advice that I've heard.
Yeah.
For sure. Last question for you. What does the 38 challenge mean to you?
It excites me. I didn't know your brother, but I feel an incredible connection to your brother. We were on the same weapon system. We had the same job. Fitness is my thing. So like I said, performance coaching, but I coach fitness and nutrition, mindset work. We do wellness, basically concierge wellness. And I think fitness can be the vehicle to a lot of healing, a lot of vulnerability. And I think the beauty in the 38 challenge is that it's accessible to everybody. And so you've created an incredible thing where through fitness and through community,
doing hard shit,
people in general can commune around, you know, one mission and one goal, do some hard shit, and then also gain an awareness around a thing that's like incredibly prevalent in our society. Like I imagine that people show up for 38 challenge, like, oh, I'm going to support this cool thing. And then maybe part of it resonates with them or someone that they love. And then so through that process, they're able to be like, hey, look, are you doing all right? Or like, I'm not doing all right. You know, any number of things. I think just being an advocate for the things that you believe in, you specifically, like, I think that that's the beauty of this program, is that you get to honor your brother. You get to like try really hard at a thing that you believe in. And then through that process, you get to help a bunch of other people. So I'm really excited about it.
Well, I'm excited to change the world with you, bro.
Let's
Seriously,
change the
man.
world.
All right. Love you, man.
Love you too, dude.
Let's go knock out this workout.
Fuck
Jump
yeah.
at some cool shit.
Sick.